I want to say something about the shamanic illness, that phenomenon from a far flung, remote culture in the Far East, the shamans there, and how that relates to us. What's that really about? Well, the way it's put is that the young person who's supposed to become a shaman, he gets ill. He's trying to be like an ordinary guy. Um, and the spirits come in and go, you got to be a healer as well. Yeah. Because you don't, in those cultures, it's not like you become the holy man and you get paid to do it or whatever. It's like, no, you still have your ordinary life to fulfill. And then you have these duties on top. It's like these duties on top. Um, and people don't necessarily want that. But also, I think more deeply, it's scary. They're comfortable with who they are. They're comfortable with who they've been brought up to be because they're being taken outside the sort of collective norms, the collective rules, the collective way of seeing things. Um, that's how humanity works. It's important to recognize that. Um, we all think we're, individuals with free minds and all the rest of it, and actually we're not. We go along. We go along with the collective norms and the collective way of seeing things, and we call that being reasonable, and we've thought it through. But actually, things come with a lot of authority behind them, and we believe that authority. I mean, it was interesting during lockdown, watching people's response. Most people, they just buckle down immediately, and they believed that there's this really dangerous disease. They really, really did believe it. I'm not saying they're wrong, but they believed it because they'd been told it. I was more skeptical about it. I thought it was unnecessary. And then you saw people in the opposite extreme reacting against it, rebelling against it. I tended to be a bit like that. I just had to get over myself a bit with that. Still be a bit like that, even in my old age. Um, so it was fascinating watching the group at work when these events happen. You see it. You've seen it also with the whole net zero carbon thing. Without going into the rights and wrongs of that, you see how the collective has been persuaded into this kind of emergency, apocalyptic thinking. It's not very difficult to do that. We're usually in a crisis of one form or another. Yeah, it was the nuclear weapons crisis, wasn't it? Then it became the environmental crisis. The COVID came in for a bit. That's gone now. But now there's the potential AI crisis that might end the world. So it sort of gives us, I suppose, a point of certainty or something, and a sense of right against wrong, something like that. But it's not hard to create these crises in the collectives, particularly these huge collectives. It's like they spread like viruses. Um, so that's the collective mindset. And when you get onto this shamanic path, you're stepping outside of it. And quite often, what we do is we step outside of that collective mindset into another collective mindset. But really, and that's inevitable. We loosen up a bit, but we sort of choose the opposite. We become anti everything or whatever, or we think we know better. All the rest of it, there's a bit of loosening up, but it still is collective mindset. But really, what the spirits want to do, they want you for their own. Yeah? They want you to be spoken for. They want your source of authority to come from this other place. It's them. That in a way is the universe. And that's the difference. And that's a big shift. And it's not all at once. It's gradual. And you see it happening. It was gradual for me. And there can be crises along the way. Personal crises. I'm not talking about collective crises now. Personal crises, which is where the shamanic illness comes in. We don't necessarily want to go there. We want the security. We want the certainty of that previous lifestyle. We know what's what. Better the devil you know. Yeah, it might be uncomfortable, but at least we know it. So that, in a way, sums up why the shamanic illness occurs. Better the devil you know. Gosh, there's so much to say about this one because it's so relevant. So yeah, the young shaman, they get ill, and it's not until it may just be illnesses that are very hard to diagnose, strange illnesses. Now we know that nowadays, don't we? All these ones, but we'll come back to that. And it's not until he accepts the spirits in that he becomes well again. I'm sure it doesn't happen for all of them like that, or necessarily even for most of them. Some of us are only too happy to accept that into our lives because we can find the collective values stifling. We can't breathe. It's like, oh, I can breathe at last. Yeah, I'll bloody well do that. I'll accept this vocation. It gives life meaning. It gives it depth. It gives it breadth. All of those things. So yes, your point of authority is shifting. You no longer look to the rules of the society around you. You look to what Spirit's telling you. Now, they're not necessarily contradictory. And in a reasonably healthy society, they're not going to be contradictory. We can do both. We feel we have to be in this oppositional mode. But if you look in the traditional culture, the shamanic culture, that you don't read stories of the shaman being in opposition to the political leaders, thinking he knows better. Well, maybe he does know better, but he'd be diplomatic about it. The spirits will tell him stuff, and they would listen to him. They'd be working together. They wouldn't be in opposition like we put ourselves in opposition. Part of our spirituality is to be in opposition to the establishment. Well, that's not the case there. So they would have their own authority, spirits speaking through them, and yet they're integrated with normal life. And that's what we need to do. As long as we feel ourselves to be in opposition to society and the way it works, in that fundamental kind of way that goes on, I think it's a kind of spiritual bypass. I think it says something about ourselves. I don't think it says something about our insight. I think it says something about ourselves and that we're not bringing spirit into matter. Of course, society will always need tweaking, but you need to go with it and tweak it, not just sit there in opposition and glue yourself to pavements or whatever. That doesn't achieve anything. You need to work with. So that's, because spirit isn't just about us. The spirits, they want to express and do good within society. So we need to be part of that society. Okay. And I haven't got that far onto the shamanic illness. It's going to be part 2 of this one, I can see. But we do get the equivalent in our society. This kind of calling and people getting ill. You see it quite a lot. Things like ME, irritable bowel syndrome, multiple sclerosis, all these sort of gradual diseases that can be debilitating, that are quite hard to diagnose, quite hard to prove they're even there, which is very distressing, because it gets called just psychological. No, it's not psychological, it's real. Well, actually, it's both. And of course it's psychological. Psyche means the soul. Logos means the word. It's the word of the soul. It's your soul speaking, saying, I'm ill. All diseases are psychological. But we have this connotation of it's just in your mind. You're malingering. Because we see the mind and body as separate. In the same way that Christianity saw spirit and the body as separate. We've translated that into mind and consciousness being separate. But no, these illnesses are real, but they're also the soul. Part 2 next time.